The Mongol Empire. For 2 centuries, its horsemen thundered across the steppes, carving out the largest contiguous land empire in history. To their enemies, the Mongols were an unstoppable storm. To their allies, they were the embodiment of power and discipline. At their peak, under Genghis Khan and his successors, they commanded armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands, an unstoppable wave of horse archers, heavy cavalry, and ruthless strategy. But today, we're going to ask a question that sounds like a late-night internet meme, yet has real military depth. What would happen if the Mongol Horde met an Apache helicopter? On one side, the masters of mobility. On the other, a flying war machine designed to annihilate tanks, armor, and ground troops with terrifying efficiency. This isn't just a clash of weapons. It's a clash of entire eras, of a medieval empire that conquered the world versus a machine born from Cold War battlefields. The Mongol Horde, storm from the steppe. To understand the scale of this matchup, let's start with the Mongols. Picture this. The year is 1241. The Mongols have already swept across Asia, stormed into Europe, and destroyed armies many times their size. They move with blinding speed, striking from hundreds of miles away before their enemies even know they're coming. Their core strength? The horse archer. Every Mongol warrior was raised in the saddle. They could loose arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop, their bows capable of piercing armor at over 200 meters. They fought in disciplined formations, using feigned retreats and ambushes to lure their enemies into traps. But it wasn't just skill. The Mongols were logistical geniuses. They could cover 100 miles a day by swapping between fresh horses. They lived off the land, carried dried meat and fermented mare's milk, and needed almost no supply trains. In other words, they were mobile in a way no medieval army, and arguably no modern one, could match. At their peak, the Mongols could field over 100,000 horsemen. Imagine the ground shaking, dust clouds rising on the horizon, and a swarm of riders so vast that it blotted out the landscape. That's the horde our helicopter is about to face. The Apache, flying death machine. Now let's look at the challenger, the AH-64 Apache helicopter. Built in the late 20th century, the Apache was America's answer to a terrifying problem. How do you stop Soviet tanks from flooding across Europe in a Cold War invasion? The solution was a flying tank hunter, and the Apache became exactly that. This machine isn't just a helicopter, it's a predator. Top speed, nearly 300 kilometers per hour. Range, around 480 kilometers without refueling. Armor, enough to shrug off small arms fire, and even some anti-aircraft weapons. Crew, 2 soldiers, pilot and gunner, working in perfect sync. And the weapons? That's where things get brutal. The Apache carries 16 Hellfire missiles, each one designed to destroy tanks. It has pods of 70 mm Hydra rockets, capable of blasting entire groups of soldiers or vehicles in a single strike. And then there's the 30 mm M230 chain gun, mounted under the cockpit, firing explosive rounds at 625 shells per minute. Oh, and don't forget, the Apache doesn't just see with human eyes. It has infrared cameras, night vision, and a helmet system that lets the gunner point the cannon just by moving their head. Against medieval armies, this isn't just superior firepower. It's something out of a nightmare. Clash of eras. So now we set the stage. On one side, 100,000 Mongol horsemen, sweeping across the steppes. Dust clouds filling the sky. Arrows ready to blot out the sun. On the other, a single Apache helicopter, rising above the horizon. Rotors thundering, missiles locked, chain gun humming. For the Mongols, this would be a world-shattering moment. Imagine never having seen anything more advanced than a catapult, and suddenly being faced with a flying metal beast that spits fire, screams like thunder, and cuts down men and horses by the hundreds in seconds. At first glance, it seems obvious. The helicopter annihilates the horde. But, as we'll see, The reality is much more complicated. Because while the Apache is an apex predator of the modern battlefield, it has one weakness. It wasn't built for endless war without fuel, ammo, or supply chains. The Mongols, however, were built for exactly that. So in this first round, the Apache takes to the skies, and the Mongols stare up in awe and terror. But in the long game, the answer isn't so clear. And that's where part 2 begins, the battle itself. The battlefield is set. The Mongol horde stretches across the horizon, tens of thousands of horsemen armed with bows, lances, and the unstoppable momentum of steppe cavalry. The ground shakes beneath their hooves, dust clouds rising into the sky like a storm. Above them, a single Apache helicopter circles like a hawk. Its rotors thunder, its sensors scan, and its weapon systems lock onto targets. This isn't just a fight. It's a collision between the medieval and the modern, between flesh and blood versus steel and fire. Round 1, shock and awe. The first encounter is devastating. The Apache hovers just beyond bow range, lining up its first salvo. With a hiss, a Hellfire missile streaks through the air, slamming into the dense cavalry formation. The explosion rips through dozens of riders at once, men and horses thrown into the air, the ground scorched black. The Mongols, who once crushed armored knights with ease, now face a weapon they cannot comprehend. They regroup and fire volleys of arrows upward, but their shots fall harmlessly to the ground. Their best bows have a range of 200-300 meters. The Apache can engage targets from 8 kilometers away. The helicopter closes in, unleashing hydro rockets into clustered units. Each rocket explodes with shrapnel and fire, scattering cavalry formations. The survivors barely have time to recover before the 30mm chain gun roars to life, its explosive shells shredding warriors by the dozen. For the Mongols, it's nothing short of apocalyptic. Round 2. The Mongol response. But if history teaches us anything, it's that the Mongols were no ordinary army. They were masters of adaptation. Against Chinese gunpowder, Persian fortresses, and European knights, they always found a counter. So how do they respond to the Apache? At first, panic spreads through the horde. Horses rear, men scatter, and arrows fly blindly into the sky. But Mongol commanders were disciplined. They would quickly attempt to adapt, spreading out their cavalry to reduce casualties, using feigned retreats to lure the helicopter closer, even setting massive grass fires to obscure its sensors. Could their arrows or siege weapons bring the Apache down? Unlikely. Even their most powerful torsion catapults would struggle to hit a fast-moving target hundreds of meters in the air. And small arms fire, bows, javelins, spears, are useless. But the Mongols' true weapon isn't just arrows. It's time. The helicopter's weakness. The Apache is a technological marvel, but it isn't invincible. Fuel. It burns through kerosene at a staggering rate. Within 2 hours of flight, it needs to land and refuel. Ammunition, 16. Hellfires, a few rocket pods, and a limited chain gun supply, deadly but finite. Against 100,000 cavalry, that's like trying to drain the ocean with a bucket. Maintenance. The Apache is packed with delicate sensors, hydraulics, and electronics. Dust, sand, or damage can cripple it. Without a support crew, it won't last long. In other words, the Apache can slaughter hundreds, even thousands, but eventually it runs out of supplies. The Mongols, meanwhile, can keep fighting for months. Imagine this. After the helicopter's opening strike, the horde suffers catastrophic losses, but the survivors simply pull back, scatter across the steppe, and wait. When the Apache lands to refuel, the Mongols, masters of reconnaissance and mobility, will find it. And unlike medieval knights, they won't give it a chance to recover. Outcomes. So what's the result of this battle? Let's explore. Short-term battle. In the first hours, the Apache dominates. It tears through Mongol cavalry, leaving the battlefield littered with burning horses and shattered units. Against any single Mongol army, it would win decisively. Long-term campaign. But wars aren't won in a single sortie. The Apache's limited fuel and ammo mean that once it expends its payload, it's vulnerable. If stranded without modern logistics, it becomes nothing more than a grounded metal beast. The Mongols would overwhelm it once it can no longer fly. Psychological impact. The shock factor cannot be overstated. The Mongols might interpret the Apache as a divine weapon or demon. Fear could ripple through their ranks. Yet historically, they were pragmatic. If they couldn't beat the machine directly, they'd destroy its support systems or wait for it to fail. So, who wins, the Apache or the Mongols? In a single battle, the Apache absolutely devastates the Horde. Tens of thousands could die before they even understand what's killing them. No medieval weapon could bring it down. But in a campaign of endurance, the Mongols win. The helicopters bound by the chains of logistics, fuel, ammo, and maintenance, while the Horde is bound by nothing but the open steppe. Once the Apache lands, its fate is sealed. This is the paradox of technology. Incredible power in the short term, but fragility without the systems that sustain it. The Mongols, masters of long-term war, would exploit that weakness. So, in the end, the Apache helicopter isn't a silver bullet. It's a god of war for one battle, and a stranded relic in the long run. The Mongols, the unstoppable horsemen of history, would outlast it. But ask yourself this. If even one modern machine could terrorize the greatest empire of the Middle Ages, what does that say about the power of technology today? And what would happen if not just one Apache, but an entire squadron faced the Mongol horde? That, my friends, is a scenario for another time.